think this is it, so Mike Collins, everybody.
Right, for those who don't know, I'm Mike Collins. I draw comics, do magazine illustration, storyboard work. In terms of the audience here, the stuff I do that I'm best known for is Doctor Who and Star Trek and Babylon 5 and other things based on programs where people move around and have special effects and a pencil to copy all that and make it look nice on paper. I've been working in comics for, oh dear God, 25 years now. I started off drawing Spiderman and thought, this is it, this is the career for me, this is what I'm going to spend the next big chunk of my life doing. And then I never drew Spiderman again until about 2 months ago. I went on to do Transformers from RUK. Good fun, drawing lots and lots of tiny robots until I started going blind with the detail. And then I got work with DC working on a lot of their TSR titles. So I did Dragonlance, Spelljammer. From that I got work with Wizards of the Coast and did a stack of stuff for them, which is lots of some manuals for various games, which led to, bizarrely, illustrating Harry Potter trading cards. Harry Potter trading cards. I've got 3 daughters who have grown up with a dad that sits in the corner and scribbles. That's normality to them. They are not impressed at all. They've never been impressed until I did Harry Potter trading cards. They would bring their friends home from school and they would go to the bookshelf where the Bibles, the reference Bibles are kept, and would, with great portent, take these off the shelf and say, these can never leave the studio. Pour through the pictures, looking at the Pantone numbers. What's this L432? Oh, we don't know, but nobody can know about it. Back on the shelf again. I've sort of... People tell you sometimes their lives are planned. I've never been a fan of plans, which is probably just as well because there's no way to plan the way my life's gone in terms of the things I've done. I've managed to keep my head above water drawing comics, which in itself is completely ludicrous as a career. When I was at school, that's really what I wanted to do. And I went to the careers office and said, what do you want to do? I like drawing comics. You could be a librarian. That's the same thing. And at home I'd say to Mom, you know, I really, really want to draw Spiderman. How about being a lawyer? And parents being parents, I got persuaded that that was a really good idea. Do the law, get a decent job. And I went to university, did a couple of years of law and thought, oh, I hate this. All I want to do. I mean, I got an image in my head of, yeah, I do the law. I would be a barrister. I was aiming towards being a barrister. I'd be a barrister that drew Spiderman in my spare time. And I thought, well...
There's a comic character for you.
I sort of realised, well, you know, the barrister bit's really, really hard. And you deal with really, really horrible people. Well, drawing comics, you just have fun. Well, why don't I just do the comics? So I switched my major at university from law to politics. Which is great, because in politics you don't have to do research, you just have to have opinions. And I've got so many opinions. It's easy, you know. Go into a tutorial, what about this? Well, let me tell you what I think. Go on with that. While I was at college, I just started getting with RUK, started getting Spiderman for them. And so at the end of my degree, it was just a case of, do I do lots and lots of revision for German history since 1945 and get a 2-1? Or do I write the Spiderman script which is due tomorrow and get through? I wrote the Spiderman script. And that's been my life ever since. I've always had a lot of comics as a medium for telling stories. That's it for me. I know people, when I was growing up, and you probably had the same thing when you were at school, you were interested in comics. People go, yeah, they're just for kids. Well, they're not. Comics is a medium. Comics is a way of telling a story. If you say, oh, comics are for kids because the Beano's a comic, you can say, well, alright then, films are for kids because Bambi's a movie. It's the medium, it's the way of telling a story. I like using comics as well as an educational medium. Over the years I've been working in comics, I've done a lot of stuff for various educational institutes and publishers, using comics to teach English as a second language. Or, as I live in Wales now, teaching Welsh as a first language. which is very funny because I get these books for reluctant Welsh learners, which they have to translate into English for me so I can draw them, so then I can do the illustrations so they can teach kids to speak Welsh. Because when the books come out, I have no idea what's in it. But it's a great tool. You learn very quickly. And then the last year or so, I've got involved with a company called Classical Comics. They'll be doing a lot of school texts as comic strip. They've done Macbeth, they've done Henry V. They're doing Great Expectations now. And the one I've done for them, Christmas Carol, has now come out in time for let's think Christmas. So that was the sort of panic over the summer where they suddenly realised that we actually had a deadline on this. We couldn't go on until April. So Mike, I think we need to get this in the shops by November. Christmas Carol was a great experience for me simply because normally when you do an adaptation you have to compress the story. I mean, it's one of those things. Great Expectations is like 300 plus pages. The comic I think is going to be 160. So there's got to be a certain amount of compression of the story. Christmas Carol on the other hand is only 70 pages long and the comic is 135. So I've got to spread out, I've got to really sort of expand and do detail, which is really nice to do. I'm obsessed with research, so I did loads of research so everything that's in the book looks like it would do at the time. Let's say about 1820, 1830. So I got the costume right, and I got everything as much so it looks accurate as possible. That's a big deal for me. But also as I'm doing it, I thought, well, there's been so many versions of Christmas Carol, it'd be nice to sort of get like little Easter eggs in there, little references to old film versions. So at one point where you go to old Joe, the guy that takes all Scrooge's belongings towards the end, in the window of old Joe's junk shop are actually the toys that are in the shop window in the Arthur Sim version, but they're all broken and they're sort of like they're less scrappy. And of course, because the best version of A Christmas Carol is
Muppets.
Muppets Christmas Carol. There are Muppets in there. I find the Muppets. I didn't tell the publisher until it saw print. He said, "Oh, doesn't this look good, Mike?" I said, "There you go." All up and stabbed me, when you bastard. Too late now. I'm rambling up here. Has anybody got any questions about it?
We loosely talked about, I said I'd ask you a question, but this whole Ross and Brown's debate and editorial control, and equally a past guest here, Martin Bauer, who I saw at another convention, he got asked once to produce a book in which he did some stage model work of famous UFO incidents, so he made the models. And he kept getting it sent back to him by the editor saying, no, this doesn't look right, that doesn't look right. So in the end, he was so fed up being told this, he faked it all, he put everything in there, so he just played with it. So he put like a dead alien on the sketcher, and the publishers then absolutely loved it because it gave everything, he just blinded them.
Yeah.
Now, with editors, have you ever had an editor that you've so clashed with? Once, you've really clashed with your material, but you would then have one that you've just not put material in because you're going to have arguments, or one you've deliberately put the material in
to have the argument.
To have the argument.
Well, I'm not sure. I've generally had a good relationship with my editors. What I've found in situations where it's going to go bad, I've just walked away from the project because life's too short. There's no reason why you should just put yourself through it. And what I've found when I've worked in comics is that there's nothing worse than hating doing what you love. I've been involved in comic projects where I've just walked away. I did the Judge Dredd newspaper strip for about 3 years, and to start with, it was great because I was drawing Judge Dredd every day. And it was in the daily newspaper every day. But gradually it dawned on me it was in the Daily Star every day, which meant I had to pick the Daily Star up every day. And I just thought, I so hate this. I actually don't want my work to be in here. You know, I mean, I know it gets sold throughout the world, but well, there's a side story to that actually. After I've been working on it for a while, I was talking to somebody at Express newspaper. He said, "So what happens to the strip afterwards?" Because I was getting residuals through from other countries. He said, they tell me the various countries that the strip was sold on to. It's quite nice. You only get a few quid, but it's nice that you get a bit of extra money. And I said, well, in South Africa, it's in the newspaper Gazette. Look, Judge Dredd is in the South African newspaper Gazette. Right, all the black judges are now at the front of every panel. And the chief judge is black, he's at the front of every panel. You bastards, this is while apartheid. So I just thought, right, let's see you white out the panels now. So that's one case where I did that, yeah. But, it's an interesting question in terms of how I sort of crossed the editor. I did have an American editor phone me very cautiously when I was scripting a story for America, where I had a character referred to another one as a Wally. And they was like, Mike, this isn't a swear word, is it? You're sure? Because, you know, we're going to go to something. No, it's fine. And later on after that, I did a series called Peter Cannon Thunderbolt. It was all set in Britain. And I wanted to basically just play with various comic book cliches. So you had the, you know, the plucky reporter and the slimy reporter and the police contact. And I sort of twisted them all around and just had fun with it. But I had this young reporter on paper that instead of swearing, she kept saying Keswick. And they said, well, is this a swear word? I said, no, it's not a swear word. They made me do a glossary. The reason that she was saying Keswick is because my family, an aunt of mine was a sort of family trip up to Keswick, to Lake District, and she got stopped in the road by this guy that was walking across. I looked at her and just went, arsehole! So in my family after that, Keswick became arsehole. So this character in the comic was saying Keswick. So I had to do this glossary of English terms I was using that I just assumed were just, you know, common parlance. And all the way down I listed all these various words, like they never heard the word cadge, and the things that you just took for granted, everybody knew. And there's Keswick, a nice little market town in Cumbria. Any other questions?
Is there anybody else who wants to eat food?
I don't eat anything else.
I don't mix food with solids. You'll get yours, you will! Alright, anybody want to have lunch? Anybody else who hasn't had lunch wants to eat lunch? Because they're looking at wrapping it up. Okay, that's fine. Carry on. Sorry, my apologies.
Right. On the subject of limitations, I was reading up on a comic called Action, with characters like Hookjaw. Oh, when you sort of draw stuff or come out and do a strip, are you aware of certain limitations like, oh, they might not like that or they might not like this, so I won't draw it?
Yeah, Hookjaw is an interesting one. When the fuss about Action happened back in, is it the...
Like 1978, 79.
Yeah, okay. So sort of, it wasn't a comic I'd read because I was reading the American stuff when I was at school. It always looked just too gory for me. But I was chatting to the guys years later that draw all that stuff, and they're really the most nice, mild-mannered guys you could ever meet. I mean, all of them just look like, you know, they should be, I don't know, in a garden centre somewhere buying plants. They don't look like dark, satanic figures. But they said that they just loved working on those strips because they just kept pushing it and pushing it. And they'd have the art director come in and look over the art and go, more blood. Way more blood. On limitations though, I did some work for the Games Workshop comic, the Warhammer comic that came out a couple of years back. And I thought, great, because I'd done illustrations for Warhammer in the past. I thought, great, I can do a full-on nasty strip. I got censored by Warhammer. How badass am I?
That's an interesting question, because I'm currently reading Charlie's War, getting the bound volumes, and I was talking to somebody else, because I read them when they first came out in the early 80s, and apparently there's been like soft cover bound volumes where they had been censored.
Oh, right.
And with the hardbacks, they've gone to the original source, so they're printed in their original form.
Yeah.
So what was censored?
I drew a character being slit down the middle with a big sword. And they put a big sound effect all the way down it. I'd done all this detailed half-cut organs and everything. My artwork was wasted. They said, oh, you know, it's too sensitive to put things like, you're Warhammer! I was expecting cuddly bunnies. I don't know. So yes, I got censored by Warhammer, so hurrah.
Tell the people the most unusual academics.
Comic censorship's a bit strange though, because a friend had a Friday the 13th comic, and the cover was a dead teenage girl having been gutted by Freddy or whatever, so she's got intestines hanging out and so on, and she's naked, so they've artfully tossed hair over her nipples, so you can't see them. You're going, so it's okay for teenage boys to see their girlfriend's intestines, but not her nipples. It's kind of, there's something a bit odd going on.
Particularly Americans are very weird about stuff. I always say that the difference between American and European comics was nipples.
So are there differences within different markets?
Definitely. Yeah.
So what can you get away with over here that you couldn't get away with somewhere like America? Obviously nipples is a good example.
When I first started working for DC Comics doing the superhero stuff, I had a scene in a strip where you have these, it was sort of Flash, was this group of super fast villains that were stealing jewellery, were stealing all sorts of stuff, and one of them nicked a suitcase, was handcuffed to this guy's arm. So when he nicked the suitcase at speed, the handcuff obviously cut the guy's hand off. So I drew that because I've been working 2,000 a year, that's what you did. I got this horrified phone call, oh my God, what have you drawn? It's just a little hand. That's a carpet, so they put a word balloon over the hands, this guy going, stumped.
Yeah, but they did that in the first Mad Max film.
Yeah,
gets handcuffed to a car and rips his hand off.
Yeah, it's interesting how things have changed as well. There's a lot of stuff that gets passed in American comics now that certainly wouldn't when I started. The field changed quite a lot. Because when I was involved in American comics, this is going back, I say, more than 20 years, the comics code was still very strong. I mean, there's like certain swear words you couldn't say in comics, including damn. If it was a DC comic, you say it in a Marvel comic or a DC comic. I think hell was a problem for some. Certain characters were allowed to say certain words. I think Nick Fury could say certain nasty words, and other characters couldn't because he'd been in the war.
That brings me on to another interesting question. This is the 1950s era and McCarthyism, because criticism was levelled at Batman and Robin, how they were drawn. Insofar as, when they're drawn from the front, it looked like they were showing off their genitals. That actually came up in the McCarthy inquiries.
It's a weird one. You do, if you read Wortham's Such an Innocent, which is the book that sort of brought in that whole thing with the comics code, there are references he picks in there, but that are far worse than that. There was one shot of a character he was on the beach, so obviously he was topless, and there was some shading on the bit there with the collarbone, and they decided that looked like pubic hair.
Oh my God!
One, you wouldn't have pubic hair too, and they what's wrong with you? But it was that really strange atmosphere that was around at the time in the 50s, that everything. I just say, I think if McCain had got into America as a president, he'll actually be having that now. Because some of the stuff behind, some of the groups behind Sarah Palin particularly, are of the same sort of people that were around at MacArthur time.
Yes.
They're very, very similar people. And thank God we've got Barack Obama, who, damn him, is 3 months younger than me, so I'm now older than the American president. Wrong. But, no, it's wrong, isn't it? Sure, please tell me. The American president, you're loads older than you. You should be older than him. But no, I think we've dodged a bullet. McCain and Palin, if they got in, we would have. You could see the way it was going with their campaign. That things were going to get more and more prescriptive. But hopefully now that little nightmare's gone away for a while. And have I lost the thread of that?
Well, no, it's just all about restrictions. So is America really, when it comes to art, the primary market? So you have to be aware of certain restrictions when you draw in the first place.
Yeah.
Or have you ever been edited behind your back?
Well, the Flashpoint came out, and it was changed without me knowing it. I think I've had little bits and pieces changed on stuff I've done for licensed material for DC, where they've decided that even though a character's costumes are allowed in the regular comic, it has to be slightly more demure if it's done as a giveaway to kids or something like that. But things like that don't bother me too much.
You just take the money and smile.
Well, there's not else you can do about it. You can't be, I'm a professional and you've slighted me, I walk away from this. You can't do that. And comics is an industry. I'm an artist, but at the same time, I've got a family, I've got a mortgage. It's my job. It's what I do for a living. And comics particularly is a very collaborative medium, so there's not just one person who's involved in it, there's a whole bunch of people involved in each project you work on. So you've got to think how things affect other people. I mean, I have walked away from projects where there's been too much interference, or I've realised it's all going to go bad. But it's always like a case of, I'll sort of let them know, look, I can't cope with this, I'm not going to cope with this, so I'm going. It's never sort of being a prima donna saying, I'm stalling out, but I make sure things are sorted out, so I'm not leaving it high and dry. But, I make a point that this isn't for me and I've gone. On censorship, there's this whole thing about smoking in comics. It's certainly got a big deal now because they're talking about reclassifying films in America that have got smoking in them, which includes 101 Dalmatians. So that might become a restricted movie because it's got characters smoking in it. Can't really smoke. When I got started in British comics, there was a big thing about smoking then in comics, and
it's an e-cig, it's legal. Just say it's an e-cig. Superman with an e-cig, legal.
Yeah, there you go. I made my Gary Leach had drawn this strip with his character smoking a big fat cigar, because that sort of was part of the character was in the script. And he was really shocked to find out when the comic came out that he decided, oh, we can't have cigars in here, got to take this out. So all the way through the strip, because they didn't give it back to Gary to change, all the way through the strip, you've got this character sitting there going, great, because that looks so much better now, doesn't it?
That's actually quite interesting, because as a 2000 AD Robo Hunter had electronic ciggy, which ran for the entire strip.
Yeah.
Again, 1980s, the first example of an e-cig.
Yeah.
Blimey! Talk about looking into the future.
Well, that's what 2000 is all about, even though now it must be a period piece in 2008.
Which brings me on to another question, which is styling of a given character.
Right.
Considering that 2000 AD, let's take Judge Dredd for example. Okay. Now, a number of artists, I can only remember one, and I call him Carlos the Squeezer because I can't pronounce his bad name. Went for sort of great big knee pads, great big boots, and while another artist pretty much drew him in proportion. So the question is, do you sort of, when you've got to get, do a continuation of a given character, which style do you prefer to go for? The slight exaggeration or something more in proportion?
Dredd's a special case. It's almost like the written rule, the unwritten rule of 2000 that if you draw Dredd, you draw your Dredd. Because the character's costume is so detailed and so involved, there is such a range of different versions you can do of him, and it's still recognisably Dredd. If you're drawing Spider-Man, you're drawing Spider-Man. There is the Spider-Man costume, and that's it. You know, you vary from that too much, and it's just not right. Batman, the same. And also the Americans, again, this gets different in Britain and America. The Americans are very conscious of their trademarks on their things. That they want things to look a certain way so that maybe they can cannibalise your material. They can turn up as duvet covers.
Yeah, merchandising, in other words.
Yeah. So it all has to sort of follow a style guide, and actually is official DC style guides, Marvel style guides. You do get sent through and this is how the character looks. At Marvel, when you draw Spider-Man, they send you through what they call cheat sheets, which are key model poses of Spider-Man. And if you're not a very good artist, you can tell because they just copy off the cheat sheets. They don't do their own interpretations. It's like, oh, he looks like that, so he looks like that. But as I say, Dredd's so far out there, Dredd's so far on his own that you can't really do anything you like with him, so long as it's recognised with the elements of the Dredd costume. Well,
Dredd's helmet must be a bit of a sod because if you look up his helmet, his nose is like this. It's always flat in his face. Well, how do you cope?
They about 10 years ago, these guys built the Dredd before the movie.
Yeah.
The movie.
I can't remember.
What, it was about 10 years ago?
Yeah, a bit more than that.
Must be about mid-90s.
Yeah, okay. Well, just before that, these guys sort of thought, okay, Dredd's about to come off really big. And they built the proper Dredd, so like pretty much like the official Dredd outfit. And it was a fantastic bit of kit. And I met them at a couple of shows. After the same time I met them, said, look, this is just too good. When the show's finished, can I just take loads of photographs of you in various poses, so I've got some really good Dredd reference. Every shot I took of Dredd looking at his helmet, you can see the full face.
Yeah, which is one thing you can't do
there, so you can see the guy's face completely. Yeah. So every time you draw it, you've got to fake it.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
It's obviously, this is why the film fell down, because nobody is supposed to know what Dredd looks like, and the film broke that rule.
No, the film did so many rule breakings. He had Stallone for a start. He got to end the wrist. What? No, actually the first 20 minutes of the Dredd film I love. I think he's great.
Yeah, I agree.
And after that, oh dear God.
No, as soon as he took off his helmet, that was it. Sorry, you're out of here.
Yeah. And the comedy sidekick should have died very early on, and died again, and died again. But no.
I thought the characters are great, especially the Angel brothers. Yeah. Very well done.
Yeah. There's some great design work in that film. I mean, there's bits of you look at the books of the artwork. the amount of attention to detail that went into it was brilliant, but in the end the script wasn't that great, and it was still alone. I'm sorry.
It's spooky, even in the early 80s, there's, in the 2018 comic itself, who should play Dredd, and there's always a toss-up between Schwarzenegger and Eastwood.
Yeah.
And they ended up with Stallone. Nobody
But
listens.
Schwarzenegger would have murdered it, because he cannot act.
No.
Stallone did a better job than Schwarzenegger would have done.
This is true. Actually, the best I've heard recently, I think, is on one of the 2000 message boards. Somebody suggested the guy that plays Ty on Battlestar Galactica.
Oh,
He's actually got a fantastic chin.
Yeah.
And he's grizzled.
Grumpy bastard.
Yeah, and he's a grumpy bastard.
Yeah.
So he's perfect. He's great. He's great. I go for that.
That would work quite well.
Another question?
What are the particular problems of drawing real people as opposed to made-up characters? I'm talking in terms of actors as real people, which is a contradiction at times.
Actors as real people. Well, this sort of gets mainly to sort of the Doctor Who stuff I've been doing for the past few years, is that there's David Tennant particularly. David Tennant is a fantastic actor. When I started on the strip, obviously there weren't any episodes aired, so I hadn't seen him in action. So I went and looked at things like Casanova had been in, Blackpool had been in, got the DVDs of those, doing screen grabs, trying to get face shots right. When he turns up as Doctor, he's a completely different person. I mean, it's what you're saying about the difference between a real person and an actor. He acts. Doctor Who is an act, and there's a whole range of expressions, the way he holds himself, the way he talks, the way he moves, that's completely individual to the way he plays Doctor Who. And it's not the way he played the detective in Blackpool, and it's certainly not the way he played Casanova. He's just, goes down this one line. So as I started drawing, I just wasn't getting him right to start with at all. It was nowhere near how he was. And then when I started getting episodes, doing screen grabs off them, I was getting more artwork sent back because I was pretty much drawing what David Tennant looks like. However, what David Tennant looks like when you capture him mid-scene is a totally mad bastard. And they were saying to me things like, that's not David Tennant, that's Kenneth Williams. I'll send you the screen grab, that's what he looks like. So no, make him more handsome. And in fact, the strip I just finished on Friday, I got through a whole strip, and there's one particular scene where the Doctor's looking over his shoulder and smiling. So we said, oh, we're not going to do that, are we? He's like, yes, we are. And I'd drawn it, and it said, you've got to redraw that. He said, he looks too mad. And I said, listen, I'll send you the reference. You'll notice that I've made him 80% less mad than he's in the reference. It's a tricky one. So, Eccleston was interesting because he's got a very clear idea of what he looks like, and it's nothing what he looks like. So I did some shots of Eccleston that were sort of pretty much, sort of photo accurate, and he turned it down and said, no, that's not me, I'm thinner than that. So I did some shots again, and thinner, so I'm thinner than that. Okay, so there's some shots who were really, really thin, and he liked them, and I thought, but that's not Christopher Eccleston. But that's what he wanted, so he was quite happy about that. And I think I said to a couple of you there as well that the one person I had no problems with at all was Billy Piper. I did character design because the BBC's contracts say that if your likeness gets used in another medium, you have to prove it. So Billy Piper had approval on what I drew. And I just got this note back from my editors saying, just got the word back from Billy. She says, ooh, he's giving me hips and tits, I like it. That's on my CV.
That brings me on to an interesting question about likenesses. Back in the 1970s, there was a Space 1999 comic strip in Look-In.
Yeah.
Now, they only had the license for 3 likenesses.
Yeah.
Martin Landau, Barbara Bain, and Barry Morse for season 1. All the others, they had no license, had to alter everything. How do you cope?
You have to sort of do a version that's close enough to them but isn't them. I had this when I did a Star Trek story for DC, where this one I'd written and drawn. It was I'd always wondered what happened between Star Trek 3 and Star Trek 4. There's obviously a few months have passed. The Spock's got his brain together, and there's this whole thing where various characters have become friends that were never friends in the TV show. I thought, okay, so what I'll do is I'll do this linking story that fits it all together. And what it was is I had Spock going through, sort of getting his memory back, so almost like reliving moments in his life. And there were a couple of things happening in the story. One was that I did reference to Amok Time, because that's the only time we've been back to Vulcan on the TV show. So I had Spock reenacting the whole R thing, and having there fighting or having, and he knocks Kirk to the ground. And what I was doing alternate panels, so you go things that Spock thinks he's seeing, which is, you know, back in the old series, and what's happening now. And I did this one shot of Shatner, which I got from a still from one of the photo novels. So I got it right, so it's actually as it was on the episode, so it's, you know, it's an episode still. And then I got a shot from Star Trek 3, Star Trek 4, where Shatner looks now. And as I was drawing, I said is that in the intervening period, which in Star Trek time is only supposed to be like 10 years, Shatner's hairline had moved forward 3 inches. Damn that 23rd century science, there you got it. But you know about likenesses that you're not allowed rights to, I'd drawn to Pol, isn't it, Spock's intended wife, and she's sort of in the background of the story, just runs all the way through the story. She's like a linking device through the whole thing. And this really nice headshot of it, and they said Paramount had rejected it. I said, but I've got a right. He said, yes, and we don't have the right to make her somebody else. I go, so who? He said, we don't care, make her somebody else. So if you read the comic strip, you find out that Charlotte Rampling used to be Spock's wife. So I thought she makes a really, really good, really hot Vulcan. So. More questions? Somebody asked me something. I get another beer. Harry's going for another beer.
What are you working on now?
I've just finished doing this Spider-Man stuff, the first time in 25 years, for France, for a magazine called Spider-Man Tower of Power, which is a part work thing, which actually did start over here and then didn't catch on, but it's now really big in France, where you build week by week a big tower, and you get these little figures every so often, so Spider-Man, Carnage, Venom, Wolverine, and you can put them all in the tower. Strange but interesting. So I've been drawing that, and that's been great for me because it's been the classic Marvel character. So the story I've just finished has Spider-Man versus Doctor Doom and the Green Goblin, which is just heaven. I love doing that. So I'm back on Doctor Who now. Just took a break when I was doing Christmas Carol because that took up a lot of my time. I'm about to start on an Inspector Calls, the same publishers I did Christmas Carol. That's going to be interesting because basically it's 6 people in a room talking for 144 pages. So I'm trying to look at ways I can sort of open it up a bit. I mean, if you look at the artists in the film version, they actually the flashback stuff in that they actually show you. So I think we're going to do a lot of that. But it's one of the everybody knows Inspector Calls.
Yes.
There's the whole point that you're never sure whether the girl they're talking about is the same girl or whether it's different women that just happen to be. For instance, so we've got to be so careful with the flashback stuff we don't show explicitly it's the same girl all the way through. So that's going to be an interesting exercise. What else have I got on? I'm supposed to be doing a Doctor Who graphic novel for BBC Books, which should be good fun. Because it features somebody something I've been wanting to draw for a long time. But I can't remember what yet. Oh no, but it's pretty obvious actually. It's Doctor Who. It's for BBC Books.
What, I mean, obviously we've all got our own originally video because I'm old, but which I'm replacing with DVD slowly, and I'll be having DVD when everyone's got Blu-ray. But within you, what attracts you to a film? Do you find that if you're watching certain films, is it the artwork in the film that draws you to it and you want to keep it because you see things in the artwork, the way it was designed? You know, you're mentioning Dredd, all the details and things like that. Or do you just, you get a film because you like it, or are you drawn to things because of the detail?
I think to a certain degree, yeah. And so one of the other things I do is storyboarding. And what can drive me mad in a film is where shots are set up wrong. So if people go to the cinema with me, there are people who will not go to the cinema with me. They'll say, let's just break the 180-degree rule. Yeah, shut up. Look over there. The camera's there, now they're there. How's the camera? No, shut up. And that can drive you mad. If you sort of know how the way things work, you can get driven mad by it. But no, certain things in terms of art direction that I just love. I mean, a good reference to that is The Aviator, which I thought was basically a crap film. It's not a good Martin Scorsese film, but the art direction is gorgeous. There's some scenes that just look fantastic. And I will watch the film again for that, than off of the story, to turn the sound down and just have it on for that. The film that I completely obsessed with is Blade Runner. Ridley Scott, was an artist first, did a lot of storyboards himself, and the whole thing just feels as a piece. It almost doesn't feel like various people involved in it. It's almost like it's just hermetically sealed. It's on its own, and it's beautiful. And the final cut I thought was great because he finally removed the one bit that took me out of the film, which is the dove. Every time I watch Blade Runner, actually, I'm there. And you got a dove flying in the blue sky, and you go, where's the bloody blue sky come from? And then the next scene, he's not there again. But you know, the new version, you've actually got the evil industrial sky now. It looks great.
I know I've seen an interview. I'm not very polite about Gladiator. I think Gladiator is better than Sadiator. It's one of the worst pieces of Roman whatever, because you go through it and you can just see, Spartacus in it. You can see it doesn't look a particularly good film. It seems to be whatever. But one of the people writing about it or speaking about it says it's so good having a director who's an artist, because he draws his own sketches and you can just go and straight set off the scene. You haven't got to set off the scene, take it to be approved by the director, and then says, no, get rid of this, get rid of that. As a director, he draws what he wants, goes to and the crew love him because of...
And a Gladiator is one of the most appalling screenplays I've ever heard. I just sat in a cinema and I could write this better than this. This is horrible. It just made me snigger all the way through it. But yeah, the look of it's great. In fact, there's bits in that he actually references Blade Runner, and I noticed. For certain scenes, he's actually set it up just like scenes in Blade Runner. There's one bit where the Emperor's talking. You've got the light going down. It's exactly like the office scene in Blade Runner. It's actually lit the same way. It's like, oh, I did this before. I can do this again.
I think one of the worst of the Hollywood epics from the 50s is The Fall of the Roman Empire. Stephen Boyd. And you can clearly see Ridley Scott's gone back to that. And The Fall of the Roman Empire is a better film than Gladiator. And that's not saying a lot.
Best film about ancient Rome. Absolutely. Untouched by anything else. A film called Jupiter's Darling. Have you seen that?
Is that the musical?
It's a musical about Hannibal sacking Rome. Which has...
Is that Howard Keel?
Yes, it's Howard Keel as Hannibal. Ethel Merman as Caesar's daughter, so there's an underwater sequence in it. And it ends, I'm going to spoil it here, I'm going to end it, because all the way through she's complaining that Hannibal's elephants are really boring. She convinces Hannibal in the end not to sack Rome, but to run away with her, and has all the elephants painted Technicolor. This is a film you have to see. It's the most mental... I mean, it's actually really, really witty as well. But you think, how the hell did this film get made? It's either George Saunders or James Mason plays Caesar and looks so embarrassed through the whole film. Jupiter's Darling, it's genius.
So bad it's good.
It's quite brilliant. So you had a question.
Are there any characters that you wish that you could reinvent? Let's say Superman or Batman or anything like that. You were allowed to.
If I got hold of them, what I'd do with them. I think one of the problems you got with the major American heroes is they've been around so long. I mean, even DC realised that in the 80s with the whole reboot of Crisis, so they took their characters back to basics. But that was like 20 years ago, and the characters are as messed up now as they were, probably more messed up now than they were then. Because if you sort of pitch stories or you try and draw stuff, you're suddenly realising that actually that doesn't work because they did this, and this doesn't work because they did that, and this can't be here because there's that. And the Legion of Superheroes, particularly, was one of my favourite books growing up as a kid. I can't read because I can't work out who they are anymore. Is it this Legion? Is it that Legion? Is it the Legion from this revised future or the Legion from that revised future? And apparently, at the moment, I'm not even picking them up. But there are 3 Legion of Superheroes. There are always different versions of the same character. And I was like, well, if I was a casual reader, I wouldn't be bothered. I mean, I'm a dedicated fanboy, and I can't be bothered. So I think simplifying things, that would be good. The stuff they've done with Spiderman, I'm really uneasy about, where they've just had Mephisto get rid of Spider-Man's marriage. That was just really, I don't think it was good writing. I mean, I understand why they did it, because they wanted to simplify the character. But what they should have done is just started what DC did with Crisis. Start from scratch, do Spider-Man from there, carry on from there. But it just gets too complicated. So if I was given anything, I'd have Spider-Man, and I'd just start it from scratch and just treat it as a pure straightforward strip. Don't get messed up with loads of continuity, don't get messed up with crossover stuff. My favourite Batman books are the Batman animated, because the spirit of those is the Batman I really like. I've drawn some Batman for the regular comic, but I'm always sort of beholden to the fact there's all these different versions around, and you've got to do this like this and this like that. But if you've got the animated versions, they are the pure, straightforward versions of the characters. They're fantastic. They're absolutely brilliant. And you just can get so carried up. Other characters I like to really met.
You've got so many superheroes, you just want to cut them all down into the basic ones that they used to have.
Yeah.
You know, why did you invent all these sub-superheroes who've got pretty much the same thing as the
It's, well, actually, there's a financial case for that, and it's called line extension. If you've got a brand that people know and people buy, therefore, if you bring out something that's part of the same line, you're extending the brand, therefore they'll buy that as well. Which is why you had at one point like 5 monthly Superman titles and 4 monthly Spiderman titles. And that's okay if you're just collecting one of them, but as soon as they start doing crossovers in all the books and you've got to buy all of them, then eventually you've got no money for food. And you have to burn your comics, and that's not good. But no, I agree with you. They should simplify things, get back to the basics. That's what I like most.
Would you consider creating your own superhero, quite unique from everybody else's?
Anti-hero.
How? There's so many.
Well, I did a strip for DC called Peter Can Thunderbolt, which is actually a property from the 1960s that was published by a company called Charlton that DC bought out. In fact, the Watchmen film that's coming out next year, well, the comic that Watchmen is based on was actually versions of the old Charlton heroes. Peter Can Thunderbolt was Ozymandias in Watchmen. And the idea of Peter Can Thunderbolt in the Charlton books, because Charlton only had like 3 or 4 heroes, was this guy that had trained in a Tibetan monastery was sort of heir to this great ability, but he didn't want to fight. He was basically a pacifist. He just wanted to stay back. And it was only when a situation arose where he would have to go out there and fight that he did. Where he did, obviously, he won. But as soon as DC bought him and introduced him to DC Universe, he's living in Manhattan. They go, oh, there's a fight. Yeah, what am I going to do about it? You've got Teen Titans, you've got JLA, you've got Superman, you've got Spider-Man, you've got all these characters out there. Why should I bother fighting? So I said, okay, well, because DC couldn't work out to do, so I pitched them, so okay, move it to Britain. Because there's no superheroes over here. So, you know, when something comes up, we'll have to go out and fight them. So this guy got to play one of different characters and introduced the word Keswick, because he didn't create American audience. You're going to use that now, aren't you? Keswick. It's a really good swear word. You can really get a lot of violence with it. So that was sort of me doing my own superhero, because I just sort of gave lip service to what had happened with the character before, where I just like playing with the various things. I think that at heart I'm more a humorist than I am serious, so the stories were very light and silly to a larger extent. Unfortunately, when the book came out, it was when American comics got really hard and serious and grim and gritty, so I was completely out of the picture of the rest of everything else was done there. I was doing stories that sort of started and ended in the same issue. Sure, wow, crazy idea. You know, there are 25 issues telling one story. No, I wanted to get things so you could pick that comic, read that comic, and enjoy it. And if you didn't enjoy it, that's why the next one didn't matter. You hadn't read the one before, so that's something that I quite enjoy. Again, it's going back to the animated books because that's how they work. The comic books based on the animated versions of their own characters are actually so much better because they are one story. They work in terms of creating superheroes, I don't know. Because one of my other pitches to DC at the set that I did at the Spiderman and Thunderbolt was I wanted to do a Justice League UK story, and my pitch for that was basically that if you were going to have superheroes in Britain, Richard Branson would set them. So you'd actually have Richard Branson running this franchise. That's how it would work. It wouldn't be sort of like a big, corporations are bad, just be having fun with Richard, but it would just be Branson, and DC went, no, we can't do that. And they did Justice League Europe, so. But no, there's other sort of stuff I quite enjoy doing. I love fantasy and mythology. I like doing a lot of work with that. The one thing I've wanted to do for years and never been able to get done is a version of the Welsh myth cycle, the Mabinogi. I was involved in an animated film that came out a few years back, and I did the comic book version of that, which was the first Welsh language graphic novel I found. And I can't read it because they've translated my script into Welsh. Never mind. But that's the closest I've got to doing it because that used some of the story elements. But there's so many great stories there I'd like to do versions of. So like most artists, I really haven't got an original idea in my head. but I just like other toys and I like to play with other toys.
I think probably you've just answered my question.
Oh, okay.
I was going to say, if you mentioned doing graphic novels, Christmas Carol, doing Inspector Calls, as a list of 3, are there any classic works of fiction that you would like to do as graphic novels? But saying that, you haven't got, I think you probably just saying you want to do the Welsh Mather.
Oh, there's loads of things.
But I mean, is there 3 books you would actually physically name that you yourself would like to do?
Demolish Man by Alfred Best. I've already got half planned out in my head how that would look. And at one point there's going to be a film version. I was trying to find out what studio's going to do. It's going to stand outside and beg to do design work on that. V by Thomas Pynchon. Anybody read that? Okay. V is one of the strangest novels I've ever read.
Oh, you mean no, sorry, no.
It's on the V Vendetta on the TV series.
Yeah, that's right.
No, neither of those two.
Yeah.
That's why I've never heard of it. Yeah.
This V is one of these books that all the way through reading I hated it, but I thought no, I've got to get to the end because it's such a mess of a book. And when I reached the last few pages, in the last couple of pages, it became my favourite book ever because everything was tied together so perfectly. It's a really weird series of stories that sort of linked about this character V. Now V may be a Victorian spy. V may be a character from some hidden civilization under the North Pole. V may somehow be involved in Weimar Germany. And all the way through the book, you get cutting through. So there's one character in 1950s America that's sort of researching all these things where V incurs into his family storyline. So you get these flashbacks to these different stories. If I did that as a comic, what I'd do is I'd actually set it up in such a way that each different story, so a Victorian romance, a sort of Fassbender's sort of Last Days of the Right Thing, that would all be done by different inkers. So I'd draw the whole thing, but have different inkers do it, so that each thing would feel differently. So there'd be something very artistically separate about each bit of story. So that'd be good to do. A third book.
Is there anything in Dickens or,
Well, I'd like to do Talented Cities. I don't know.
Or any other, classic like that, traditional classic.
Traditional classics.
Well, I don't know if that's the right words, but you know what I mean.
Traditional classic. I've been in talks about doing Richard III because that's my absolute favourite Shakespeare play. It's the one I've seen the most versions of, and it's one that I've wanted to draw since I was at school, mostly for A level. I just thought, this is a great comic, a load of death betrayal, and the guy that goes, hey. You can't underestimate that.
Just thinking,
and I'm really the villain.
I'm just left thinking, because of course, what would you have there? You're drawing your own character, but obviously you would end up. Would you be able to incorporate Ian McKellen into it? It's setting in the 1930s, but you'd be doing it in the 15th century. But at the same point, then you've got Laurence Olivier with his hump, in the background.
Oh dear. You can find ways of doing it. I've never seen the film version, the McKellen film version. I saw it on stage, but for some reason I've always managed to miss the film version. But that one just struck me as being brilliant, because what they did with that, they just said, okay, it's set between the wars, therefore we'll set it between the wars. So that's why it's set in the 30s, and it becomes this mirror to Hitler's rise. I just thought that was genius. I mean, if I did it for classical comics, which is what we're talking about in a minute, it would have to be absolutely straight. It had to be done as it was then, because you're doing it for schools, and even though they're willing to let films do sort of adventurous versions, they really want things to be sort of fairly tied down and to the point. So that's not a problem for me. I quite enjoy doing that, and again, I love doing the research, so I get lost in doing that. One of the things in Christmas Carol, actually, if you go out and buy it, please go and buy it, is you'll find most of the doctors are in there, in various supporting roles. And my Scrooge is sort of halfway between William Hartnell and Mr. Burns from The Simpsons. It just seems to work. Except towards the end where he's Happy Scrooge, where here comes James Taylor. James Taylor makes a very happy Scrooge.
Did you draw Michael Caine in the background with you all?
I think Michael Caine's in there somewhere,
yeah.
But somebody in production at Classical Comics just got in touch with me and said, look, am I going mad? Or is that Patrick Troughton? That's Patrick Troughton, don't worry.
Here's one. You sort of mentioned research and source material. I was sort of reminded of 1978 when I think it was Marvel UK released a graphic novel of Battlestar Galactica, and half the material inside was wrong because it was a pre-production version and it was released by mistake.
Yeah.
So, have you ever had any wrong research material that you've drawn and somebody's gone, ye God, no, this is the wrong version, redraw it?
Yeah, I did Quest for Camelot, the Magic Sword, one of his animation film, and me and Dave Roach sometimes shares a studio with me, and he's my regular intro on classic comic stuff and Doctor Who. We got this commission to do the comic book adaptation of that, but the deal was we had to turn it around in a month, and the only reference they had was badly photocopied stills from the film. So we had this sheet, like A3 sheet, these stills that were like that size, that was like cell size. I said, that's your reference. So I said, there must be more. I said, no, we can't give you any more, it's secrecy. If anybody should have it, maybe we should. So we did the book, and when it came out, there's large chunks of it where characters were wearing different costumes. And I said, what happened? Oh, we didn't tell you, did we? They were wearing different costumes at this point in the story, and this is different, and this is different, and this is different. You know, you just, if they told us that all to start with, it would be great, because we would have done it. I worked on the Superman Returns adaptation, and I had all this stuff that was all copyrighted and stamped, and discs with all sorts of digital files on that you couldn't send anywhere else and couldn't do anything with it. And just saying, none of this must ever leave the studio to sign these waivers, and couldn't even tell people I was working on the project, which is a mental idea about it. And then when I went to the film, there's large chunks of the film that weren't in the comic. I said, what's it? Oh, we didn't want you to know about that. We were doing the adaptation.
Apparently those Marvel UK Battlestar Galactica graphic novels are worth a lot of money now.
Yeah, because it's all wrong.
Because it's all wrong.
There you go. It's a tricky one, and if the companies don't trust you with the reference, then it's really annoying. I've done loads of things where I have received information that nobody else is supposed to know, because when David Tennant took over, I was told about that pretty much immediately, and I was told that you, on pain of death, you cannot tell anybody who the Doctor is. If you do that, you're fired. That's it. Because as soon as I lay it out, then it'd be in papers and everything. So I wasn't telling anybody. I had this argument with my mother-in-law, who was convinced that Bill Nighy was taking over the Doctor. She would go, you're probably right. She said, I'm sure it's Bill Nighy. Damn, I can't win this one. But yeah.
Would have been a good idea to go down the bookies and place a bet that it's going to be David Tennant. I would have done.
I got so close to doing that. I thought, oh no, that's 3 Hail Marys, 4 Our Fathers. No, oh God. Any question?
You've already mentioned the Welsh comic. But is there anything else that, if somebody said, will you do this for me, you drop everything to do, and you'd really love to do?
Ooh. I'm really iffy about dropping everything. I feel very guilty about that, because I know that, as I say, comics is part of the process, and it's not just you stepping away from it and until you're dropping people in the crap because they've got to fill in the gaps for you. Christmas Carol was great, and Christmas Carol I really wanted to do it. It just happened that on the Doctor Who comic, because I've been saying for ages, look, for God's sake, we're hitting deadline every month. Get some fill-ins. I don't mind. I'm not going to cry. Get some fill-ins. So we can jump ahead a month, or jump ahead 2 months, jump ahead 3 months, whatever. Get some fill-ins. And then all the way through, and all the way through, and all the way through. And I said, well, Mike, it's running behind again. We're going to have to get some fill-ins. I think we had this discussion a few months back. So they commissioned loads of fill-ins, all featuring Martha, who then left the show. So I got this phone call, Mike. It's like this. We've sort of got the next 8 months worth of material booked. Is there anything else you can do? Yeah. And the Christmas Carol had come up, so I was like, yes, I can. I can step away from it and do Christmas Carol. Because they had asked me to do Great Expectations, and I said no, because I've got Tuesday. So it worked out really nicely. The timing was great, and I finished Christmas Carol, and I'm back on Doctor Who again. It's like smoothly installed on the next. But I think if I got offered Spiderman, that might get me as close as, and not just French Spiderman, but American Spiderman.
That's an interesting question. Obviously, you're illustrating a story. So, who decides what? Are you given a written script and you decide what is drawn? or do you get a written script and like a sub-page, say, draw this, draw this, draw this?
It actually varies. On things like Doctor Who, where everything has to be approved by the BBC, I get it panel by panel breakdown. I'm told each picture is like that. Quite a lot of comics work that way.
So,
well.
so you basically get a paragraph saying, we want in this picture this.
Yes. So it's sort of like a film script in that respect. You get stage directions and you get the dialogue. On something like Judge Dredd, it tends to be that you'll get something like panel 1 Dredd and then it's dialogue, and it's up to you to compose a scene.
So it's like dialogue and you draw the picture around that dialogue.
Yeah. There's a way of working that's known as the Marvel method, which they created in the 1960s with Marvel comics, because Stan Lee was just writing everything under the sun. He realised he couldn't do full script all the time because there wasn't enough hours in the day. So what he'd do is he'd basically give the artist, he'd either talk through the story, which is quite often what happened on things like the Fantastic Four, where he'd say to Jack Kirby, okay, in this story there's this big cloud coming to Earth and it's looming over the planet, and the Watcher turns up and tells Reed Richards that actually there's this creature called Galactus in it, and Galactus is going to destroy the Earth. And Jack Kirby goes, okay, I'll go draw that. Go away, come back a couple of days later, and he's drawn the story. But Jack Kirby being Jack Kirby is also included the Silver Surfer. And Stan's like, who's this? Oh, he's the Herald of Galactus. Yeah, okay. Right, okay, what does he say? Oh, he's pretentious speaking. Oh, he's like, okay. So things like that happen if you work Marvel method. I really like working that way, because if you've got a writer and an artist that click, then you get some fantastic stories. Because quite often, I've found myself when I've written for other artists, is that if you're writing, quite often, you're writing closed room dialogue. You're having characters sitting around talking. But as an artist, that's a nightmare. You want to open it up. But if you actually say to the artist, this happens and this happens and this happens, and the way that Chris Claremont used to work on the X-Men was that he'd actually sort of, half the page would be what the characters are thinking, or what the characters are feeling. If you had to go through, you could just like line about 4 things that actually told you what was happening artistically. But you could use all that background detail to inform the way you lay the page out and where the characters, where the characters' body language work toward each other. And then Chris would come in afterwards and then do the dialogue over the top, knowing that you picked up the various things. And it could be that you've seen what Chris has written and say, oh, actually, what would be really nice if this is a silent sequence. You just put a note in the margin saying, Chris, no dialogue here, and it works great that way. But of course, if he'd come in and just written it straight, you wouldn't have had that interaction, you wouldn't have that development of the concept.
That brings me on to another interesting question. Let's say for a comic, let's say, we want from you 2 pages. Are you allowed to take the story where you want it, or do they sort of say, I want the story to start here and end here, and just you've got 2 pages in order to tell this chunk of the story, or do you have a little bit more freedom?
There's a bit of freedom sometimes in moving panels around. When I worked on a book called Dark Stars for DC, the writer on that was a guy called Michael Jan Michael Friedman, somewhere around, some arrangement of those names. I used to call him, he's the other Mike. And he would just give me this Marvel style outline of where the story was. And what I'd do is I'd go through and say, well, okay, because he's a novelist, he's got all these long sequences of people talking. So what I'd do is actually shunt all that stuff up to a certain way. And bits where I knew would be really nice artistically, I would give loads of pages to. So when Mike got the artwork to dialogue, to say, well, okay, this worked better as a full-page splash, and your character's talking. Actually, we can get away with 1 page of that rather than 5 pages you want in the script. And it used to work out fine with that. He cried occasionally, but big city. So that's quite nice when you've got the freedom to do things like that. We can move things on. I've worked on scripts as well where, say things for 2000 AD, first got in touch with the editor and say, look, this isn't working at this pace, and can I have another page? And actually they just go, yeah, go ahead, just add a page to the end of that, just to make the story's pacing work better that way. The worst I ever had, and this is the worst version of working Marvel style, was a story for Mr. Miracle comic for DC, where Mr. Miracle's girlfriend, Big Barda, I'm really not making this up to you, goes to Paradise Island to hang out with Wonder Woman for a bit. So they have a fight. That's what big girls do. The script I got through was page 1, close-up of Big Barda and Wonder Woman facing off against each other. Page 2 and 3 spread. We see them standing in the arena, and behind them we can see all the other Amazons goading them on. Pages 4 through 9, they fight.
It's true.
I was like, great, okay, they fight. So I had to then pace a fight all the way through that.
Yeah, again with the restrictions, page-wise, Garfield in 3 panels in a paper seems to work quite well. Now I also read, I don't know what paper it was. It was a Judge Dredd, The Cursed Earth, which was done in 3 panels as a strip and a paper.
Yeah. And
it still, oddly enough, it worked.
Yeah.
Just 3 panels. So, how do you work with something that small? In terms of, if you were told you've got 3 panels, newspaper, Daily Mail, go, and you have 3 panels in which to tell a certain segment of the story. All the ones like Garfield, they work in 3 panels.
They work like that because they're gag strips, and gag strips work. That's the way a gag strip works. Doing that with adventure strips, actually, I think quite often is a brilliant discipline to work to. It's almost the worst thing you can ever say to an artist is do what you like, because then you've got nothing to bounce off. If you've got restrictions like the 3-panel grid like that, then that's you hung things so they fit, that you hung things so they work, and you sort of pick up on that. If I'm told that I've got to draw things in a certain sequence or a certain way, then it's like, okay, then that's what I'm working against, therefore I'll make that work. If I'm told, do what you like, then you've got nothing to hook it on. So it's almost like music in that sense. That there's a certain pacing to things that, as I was doing the Judge Dredd newspaper strip for whatever it was, 3.5 years, I did sort of get into the rhythm of the strip, the way it worked, the 3 panels, 3-panel format. Occasionally I'd sort of break it and add an extra panel or something if I thought it would work better, but generally it was just everyday 3 panels. So it's like saying about where a song's structured. There is a certain, for want of a better word, grammar to where these things work. What I've found working in animation and doing storyboard work is that there's a similar grammar, but it's not the same. So I've had to unlearn a lot of stuff I did in comics when I'm doing animation, because certain things you do on a comic page you just can't do in animation. They don't work the same way, and you've got more opportunities to move things around in animation, and you've got the opportunity which you never have in comics, unless you work in Japanese comics, of moving things from right to left. Everything in comics moves from left to right. Or if you're designing a page, you've got to design it in such a way that the eyes, without realising, you've been led through the page. So you have characters standing a certain way, or you have light and shade put in a certain way. So your eyes actually led through the page.
Again, this goes for drawing for specific markets. Yeah. Rules for one country, rules for another. Yeah.
So the Japanese stuff is all obviously right to left because that's the way they read things. And it's just a completely different way of addressing the material. I've seen Arabic comics that are the same way because obviously they read right to left as well.
Mentioning your Richard III idea, I mean, they do sort of, I've never bought them. I'm a great collector of spraying men-at-arms. It's like individual military units. And they've started doing some graphic novels. Now, they do come over a little bit like the boy's own adventure to Pearl Harbor.
Oh, ye gods, have you read that one?
But, if you were to possibly put forward your idea to them, I don't know whether you'd get your Richard III autograph.
I don't know.
There's about 4 of them. They seem to be centred on certainly World War II, American Civil War, that kind of thing.
I should point out they are aimed at an American audience.
Right.
Be warned, I've read them and I've refused to buy them.
Oh, it's completely sidetracked here. There was a comic that came out last year or the year before last called was it Bullet Points or something like that? It was written by JMS, and it was like an alternative version of the Marvel Universe. And it had, has to be one of the, you'd have loved it, it had one of the greatest lines about the Second World War I've ever seen. Where it said, Churchill was so shocked about what happened at Pearl Harbor that the British got involved. This is JMS, he knows his history, for God's sake. But yeah, I'm just thinking,
It's kind of bizarre. These Osprey graphic novels, if you think of a film like Tora was made for the British market, and Pearl Harbor was made for the American market, the Osprey books are like Pearl Harbor, the film.
What a great movie that was as well.
What a bag of shit. So now you know what the Osprey books are like.
It would help with the Osprey because of, I collect them and I think Osprey have gone down quite dramatically in recent years. But they certainly do seem to be, as Barry has said, they're very much more American subjects. And I said it would be much more interesting in the graphic ones if you could get away from the American Civil War was the greatest battle at war ever, Second World War.
Not Charlie's War, Kerry.
Yeah.
Oh, so then you mind Charlie's War?
Absolutely brilliant Charlie's War. It's one of the best comic strips to ever come out. Work of genius.
But I don't know, because I mean, I'd like to see something like the Battle of Naseby, or you know, Shrewsbury, or whatever. You know, bring some a little bit more.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see if you can get that sort of project. I mean, that sort of ties into like I said, the educational stuff involved.
Yeah. Which is what we're getting to. Some of that on.
But obviously, you can say it's a bit boys' own adventure. That's really not going to approach it.
I don't know whether you'd be able to lever them a little bit to get an experiment or something.
Probably not. No. I think actually, in terms of war strips, Charlie's War is absolutely the best one that's ever been produced. Fantastic, and it's again meticulous research. Everything looks right, everything feels right, everything sounds right in it, and it's horrible. You know, it does feel like it was a desperate time. This is vile. But it's great. It's also an exciting comic strip. It works on that level. Pat Mills that wrote it. Pat's obsessed with research. I used to work with Pat on Triple Slain, which is a Celtic barbarian strip. And you would get the script, which would be that big, and the research would be like that. The envelope, I think, was ripped out of magazines. He said, "Oh, it should look like this. It should look like this." That sort of feel to it. You just get lost in it. And in fact, for a while, I was completely believing everything Pat was telling me as I was drawing it. I went down to Glastonbury. Because the one story I drew for it was set around Glastonbury Tour, where I suppose with the Zodiac marked in the ground. And I went down there and thought, I can sort of see this, I can see where Pat's coming from, and after working on a script, I said to back here, he's completely mad, this is wrong, this is insane. But at the time, I just get so wrapped in the material, because when I drew it, hopefully I had that sort of credibility to it. I don't like the idea of a boys' own adventure version of Pearl Harbor. The film, like I said, the film Pearl Harbor was horrible as well. Why didn't Ben Affleck die? Repeatedly. I was with the Team American World Police on that.
Well, it's actually quite bizarre because the Osprey graphic novels are somewhat crude in their artwork. It's not so much the artwork that I criticise. It's just the way the story goes. It's very American chest thumping stuff.
Yeah.
Now, Commando comics, they're different.
Yeah.
They're training manuals. I like those.
And mostly drawn by Spaniards.
Would surprise me the slightest.
I'm never a big fan of war comics at all. Never enjoyed them, but Charlie's War was definitely exceptional because it felt that felt real to me.
Well, you can see where the research came in the last, not the last one before last, I bought last year. I put there's one panel, a beautifully drawn Dennis fire engine.
Yeah.
Which happens to be a Type 3 Airfix box top, reversed. You can put the two next to it. So that's where he got it.
Oh, yeah, he's terrible actually when you start spotting reference.
I know, I'm sorry I'm like that.
No, that's alright. No, I remember reading some Spanish comic strips and looking through it, and suddenly, oh, fantastic art, but I've got that photograph of the elephant just traced. Damn. He's like, yeah, sorry, you've lost me. Yeah. I mean, I use a lot of reference, obviously doing things like Doctor Who and doing Star Trek and what have you, but I have to use reference. It has to look enough like the characters to work. But I'm very conscious that it shouldn't look like I just sat there and traced photographs, because all that looks like is a traced photograph.
That leads me on to an interesting question. When you are drawing a person like Chris Eccleston, now you managed to capture Chris Eccleston's look with so few lines. What do you look for when you start to draw a person like that?
I usually start with the eyes. If you get the eyes right, you've got half the face. Eccleston, generally okay with Eccleston. I think the only thing I got sent back with Eccleston was when I apparently drew him like Bruce Forsyth. Fair enough.
It's hardest to see. I mean, well then I suppose Barry's asking. I mean, Mike here is drawing people, and
yeah,
I'm on the list. Can you talk people through as you're drawing someone, or do you find that if you were talking, it would annoy you as you were drawing?
Yeah, I think probably it's like driving.
I was just trying to say, if you were drawing, since I'm waiting for that, obviously, if you had some people behind you saying this is how you do it,
yeah,
you wouldn't be able to do the two things at the same time.
It's like it's one of those things because I've been doing it for so long. I actually started doing portrait stuff when I lived in Hastings. I was working for the magistrates court down there. Because the pay was crap. This is back in my law career, glorious law career. And to make money, I used to do portraits of people overnight, and I learned ways of doing it in such a way that you did a reasonable likeness of the person and something they'd be happy with having of themselves. So there are certain sort of, I don't say tricks because that sounds like it cheapens it, but there's certain ways of approaching a face so you make it work. The worst I've ever had, absolute worst I've ever had. The church that my wife and kids go to, they had a fete one weekend, and the church actually in a really rough area, Cardiff. And so we're down at this fete, and I'd been conned into going there, sort of dragged along. So, your husband can draw, he can do some things for us. Yeah, okay. Draw portraits of people. No, fair enough, raising money for because I think the chapel was having a roof rebuilt at the time. So I'm sitting there sketching, and the ugliest woman on earth came and sat opposite me with a bag on her, and she had arms like the Hulk would be green with envy for me. Make me look beautiful. I just sat there going, oh, dear God. And I actually have no idea what I drew, but she seemed to be quite happy because she didn't hit me. So, but that was absolutely the worst moment, artistic moment of my life. How do I get through this? It's a tricky one. I mean, I've drawn portraits of people where people. I mean, I think they look like people because I've drawn them. But sometimes you get people themselves don't think they look like their friends do, which is interesting because people have got this very clear idea of how they look. And it's never how they look.
It's like spitting image, they're caricatures. Some things are exaggerated and some things aren't. So have you ever thought about doing it to some creation of yours? Taking someone who is well known and just taking the mick out of them by exaggerating them because you don't like them.
I was going to be drawing a comic in the late 80s called Dice Man. That was a spin-off of 2030. And we were going to do some role-playing games based around real events, and I was going to be doing Ronald Reagan. You are Ronald Reagan. And actually there's a sample art for the whole thing fell apart at the last minute, unfortunately. But I was really going to relish doing that. You got to snog Maggie Thatcher at one point. It was a Pat script.
Changing the subject, I seem to vaguely remember in the distant past, because we did email, you've got cats, haven't you?
Not anymore, I don't know. No, my cats have gone away with all cats.
Because they used to sit with you or something, you drew.
Oh, in the winter, my tabby cat would actually sit there. So drape myself down there, so I'd be drawing like this. It's like, damn me. And there are various pages of my artwork that have cat prints all over them as they walk across the drawing board.
Yes, mine have a nasty habit of walking all over my laptop.
Yeah? No, I have no pets now. I don't work at home anymore. I've got a studio down in Cardiff Bay, which means that quite often at lunchtimes you can't get out because they're filming torture there. So.
Oh, such hardship.
Yes, if you go into the bloody sandwich shop. Hurry up, blow at the car so I can have a lunch. Actually, quite funny. One of my old DC editors came to visit over the summer, and he's a massive Doctor Who fan. He said, "Oh, you've got to take me around, mate. You've got to, I've got to get to meet people." But he's not necessarily going to meet people. It's not like they're filming it every day. It's not. Turns up, we turn a corner, and Captain Jack and the Ant are walking towards us. Did you organise this, Mike? Yeah. I left him with my assistant because I had to go back to the studio and work. And I met Eve Miles because she drinks the bar in the corner of my studio. And they both ran up to said, "We know Mike. Mike works for me. I work for Mike." And they both got hundreds of feet miles. I bloody didn't. So you went back to America and those friends, "Go visit Mike. You get to meet all the stars." It's very strange.
For the beautiful scene in Spiderman, or one of You Are Ronald Reagan, was that beautiful?
One manufacturer.
I think Hunt did that one, didn't he?
Yeah.
Hunt Emerson did the You Are Manufacturer.
And Ronald Reagan was in that one.
Yeah. So it was that way around on that one. This was meant to be a separate adventure again. And we were supposed to do one for this short-lived newspaper, Sunday newspaper. Sunday News, the one that Glenn Fabry did some work for it. I was meant to do one which I was writing, which was You Are Ray Reardon. It was very strange.
Hey?
It was a snooker dice man story. It was just like.
He looks like a vampire. He looks like Dracula.
Yep, that's how we played him. Yes, but it never saw print. So, I got paid for it, but it's really unfortunate. It's going to be drawn by Ian Gibson.
It's a case of smile and take the money.
Well, no, actually, I really got into it when I started working on it. Just the idea of, pot black dice man. It was just.
I suppose it's been, how many projects have you worked on? Yes, this is going to go places. Yes, this is my bread and butter, and suddenly it all ends.
I was working regularly for Marvel on their Star Trek line of comics. And I'd done some early Voyager stuff, so it was Captain Pike, and I did the second 5-year mission that took on after the Star Trek motion picture. And I saw
the Pike stuff, I liked that.
Yeah, it was good fun. I really enjoyed working on that, and I was supposed to do more of it, but they moved me over onto the new Voyages. And I'd gone over to America and I had this long chat with my editor, and it worked out that I was going to be doing, there was a Voyager miniseries, there was Next Generation miniseries, third miniseries, I can't remember what that was now, and there was this graphic novel that was going to be done as a piece, which was a what if Kirk had stayed in the 1930s with Ian Keeler instead of coming back. And Ian Edmondson wrote that, and it was a fantastic script, because you had Uhura and Scotty go back to try and get Captain Kirk and bring him back in time so to make a living. Uhura ends up becoming Billie Holiday. So it was a fantastic script. I was really looking forward to it. So I had a year's worth of work lined up, and then 3 days before Christmas got a phone call from my editor that said the management and Paramount have fallen out, we've cancelled the entire line. Have a nice Christmas.
That's a sod, that is.
It's like,
because the only similar thing to that was the Babylon 5 story, In the Name of Balin, which basically went after Babylon Squared, This links one story from season 1 to season 3, which is I thought was rather interesting.
Yeah, that was unusual, and Balin's Name was actually the only comic, actually, to be fair, the stuff John Ridgway done as well, were comics that they could refer to in the episodes.
Yeah.
Because those stories happened. So wherever I drew in that comic, I actually got reference in the TV show. Although I did get in Doctor Who. I wrote a Doctor Who story where I had Rose talking about the fact that she'd been to Paris but hadn't, on a school trip, and hadn't been to the Louvre, which they're supposed to do. She wandered off and visited Park Asterix instead. And Russell saw this, and then when he wrote the official biography of Rose Tyler, he included that as part of the biography. So I contributed that to Rose's life. There we go. So never made it onto TV, but it was there in the history. So, but generally you find that a lot of the licensed stuff doesn't tie in. I think to a certain degree with Star Wars, they say it all takes place in the same universe, and it's mostly true. But I think they've got the chance there if they come up with a better idea for a film, which so far they really haven't.
Well, it's what's considered canon and non-canon.
That's it, yeah.
If it's canon, it's official, you can use it.
Yeah.
If it's non-canon, it's just applied to fancy.
Yeah. Well, JMS certainly regarded the Babylon 5 comics as being canon. We were supposed to do a Babylon 5 special afterwards, but then he fell out with DC, so that never happened. I don't know what his problem was with DC. They had a real issue with him, because Valen's Name wasn't done as a DC comic. It was done as a Warner Brothers comic, a separate imprint out on the West Coast. And when they sort of got absorbed into DC, he said, well, it's DC again, I'm not playing it. So he obviously had some genuine gripe with him, so he wouldn't deal with him. So fair dues to the guy, he said that's what he was going to do, and that's what he did. So.
No, well, I found it a very interesting story.
Yeah.
It worked!
Yeah. That was cracking stuff. What else we doing? What was the thread there? Any other questions?
How long did you put the film fall apart compared with ones that you actually got to see all the way through?
Good question. I've been involved in so many projects that don't happen.
Yeah.
But doing work in animation, that happens as well. I've got a project that I came up with that the studio that I rent space off. They sort of put money behind it, and we sort of got to a stage where we had meetings with Jetix in London, where they're like, yeah, we're going to make this into a show. And I thought, right, I'm going to create a TV show. And then something happened there where the guy we were dealing with got moved upstairs, and the guy that moved in didn't like him and came away. That's not a really legitimate reason for disliking stuff. But I mean, that show still might happen one day. And it does have my name at the top. Yay!
So I remember seeing on the website, for example, your Buffy drawings, which, personal opinion only, but I thought it was way better than the crap they actually put in the graphic novels.
Oh, well, thank you for that. Buffy was an interesting one because I think they didn't pay for the likeness rights. You see, I'm pretty sure that's what the case was. They couldn't use the likenesses. So they had to be like close enough so you knew who the characters were.
Yeah, because yours actually looked like the characters.
That would have cost them more.
That was the issue I had, yeah.
I guess that was the same thing with the Terminator license as well. That when Dark Horse did the Terminator comics, they couldn't have Sarah Connor look like Linda Hamilton because they hadn't paid for Linda Hamilton's likeness rights. So it's interesting. DC tends to pay for the likeness rights. Marvel's always a bit iffy about stuff. Because when they did the Planet of the Apes films, they didn't have the likeness rights for Charlton Heston. So if you look at those comics, there's this guy with a beard.
Very vague memory of those. And they did all the film.
Yeah, it used to drive me mad because I grew up on British comics since like TV 21 where you'd have Doctor Who and you'd have all the others. It would look like the actors. And I couldn't understand why the Americans couldn't do it. It's like, I could draw better than that. Well, I couldn't then, but it used to frustrate me. Apparently that's the deal. If you have likenesses, you've got to pay for it. So in theory, I suppose you could do a Doctor Who comic that looked a little bit like a skinny bloke with a big nose. But, you know, it wasn't Chris Eccleston, but you know.
5 minutes.
Huh?
5 minutes.
Okay, any other questions?
You talked about continuities just now and about how people play around with those.
Yeah.
With a lot of the, especially with Marvel stuff, where they reinvent things and they do new interpretations, have you ever looked at the new interpretations and gone, that's not how I'd have done it? If I was going to reimagine that character, how would you have done it?
Yeah. Captain America. The ultimate Captain America I don't like. He's a git. Oh, he's just a complete git. I mean, he's this Oliver North character, whereas to me Captain America is always a sort of, he's the scared, skinny guy that wants to do something good for his country. Gets the ability, and he's forever beholden to the fact that, you know, because the guy that created the super soldier serum dies, he is the only person then that's good enough to do that thing, and that informs him the whole time. And then, you know, he's frozen ice for 40 years, or I suppose it's 60 years now, isn't it? Comes out, and then, you know, the kid that stood by him has died, therefore he's got the whole thing, he's beholden to the fact that Bucky's dead. And I always thought that was great as a character, you know, as a motivator for it. So like Superman being the last survivor of Krypton. You've got to have something that gives the character depth, gives the character resonance. Whereas the Captain America you've got in the comic then, in the Ultimate line, he's just a big git that's got a bit of power that punches people and doesn't like the French. That great line in one of the Ultimates comics where he's fighting the Skrulls. Why don't you stand down? He goes, what do you think the A stands for on my forehead? France! Well, maybe they're dyslexic, they think that. I'm not sure with the Skrulls. So, I don't know. I quite like Ultimate Spiderman. In fact, my middle daughter, who's the only one that reads comics, she loves Ultimate Spiderman. That's why she has, like your dad, Amazing Spider-Man Jaws, Ultimate Spider-Man's mine. Because it's aimed at the younger market. It's a young Spider-Man, he's still at high school. And I think it works. I think what Brian Michael Bendis. One of these people with three names that don't work in sequence. Brian Michael Bendis. Bendis. What Bendis does is great. He's sort of reinterpreted Marvel history and he's made it work. And I think actually that's quite a brilliant comic. And in terms of good comics that you can give to people and say, here's a comic to read, it's fantastic. He's taken the old stories and made them work. I couldn't have done that better than him. You know, we talk about making Spider-Man similar. Actually, Bendis has done it.
I suppose as a further extension that you could also say about how the film adaptations differ from the comics and whether you think those work or whether, again, you think there are things that they should or shouldn't have done.
Yeah, okay. The Hulk, the first one was okay, but the ending was really stupid, where his dad turns into a big sizzly thing. The one that came out this summer was also okay. I just thought, yeah. But Iron Man I adored.
I've still not seen that, but I've heard so many good things about it.
Iron Man is the character I've been reading for 30 years. It was nailed, absolutely nailed. In terms of comic strip adaptations, that's the one. That's taking the spirit of the character, the spirit of the comic, the spirit of the character's powers, everything. Again, this thing about, you know, he's beholden to what he's done in the past, he's got the shadow over him. Like he suddenly realises he's been making all these weapons for killing people, now it's his responsibility to put things right. Great. It's brilliant. And Robert Downey Jr., I could have watched 3 hours of him just being Tony Stark. Because you just thought, I want to be his best friend. And that's what you should have. That, that's the feel you should have. Dark Knight I really enjoyed. I mean, people like Dark Knight?
Yeah. Best film of the year, I'd say.
Do you think it was a little bit long?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's the only gripe I'd have against it.
Yeah, it went off a bit. I mean, Heath Ledger was fantastic. Scared the crap out of him. How was that only a 12 when he did the pencil trick?
He was genuinely quite... I mean, you look at the comics that they drew that version of the Joker from.
Yeah.
And he was very much in that vein of the Joker is a psychotic nut job.
But actually, what got me in the film was actually the Joker is the only person that's balanced in that film. Everybody else has problems and doubts and worries and concerns. He's just got this straight line. I'm this, mad, but that's okay.
Isn't the Joker a psychopath, so he doesn't feel any, so no guilt, no
absolutely got spot on. Heath Ledger's performance was amazing. I mean, not only because he's died, but I mean, he should get the Oscar. I mean, I'm sure the fact that he died.
Well, I think there's a lot of campaign and pressure to get him a posthumous Oscar for it, really.
Because it's a brilliant film. If you put a photograph of Heath Ledger next to the Joker, you wouldn't recognise him as the same person. And anything he's done before, I mean, Knight's Tale, what have you, it's not the same person. It's just a complete immersion in a role. And that's,
That's where Jack Nicholson played it.
Yeah, Jack Nicholson was that.
This is actually quite interesting. Like with Batman, you've got different incarnations of the same character.
Yeah.
You've got the 60s comic book, and you've got the Dark Knight. Do you think they're wholly compatible with each other?
No.
Oh, well, fair enough. I shall get my coat.
No, are we out of time yet? We're nearly out of time. The different versions of Batman are like different people's
Chalk and cheese.
Yeah, different people's versions of the same song sort of thing. You're taking the same basic structure and just playing different games.
So they can sit happily quite side by side.
But yeah, they can't be in the same comic. That's true. It's it just doesn't work. The 60s Batman and the actually the 60s Batman and the 70s Batman don't work together. They're different characters. But that's just the nature of the industry. I mean, they say that the one that works for me best is the animated Batman. That's the closest to the spirit of it all.
You mean the one from the early 90s?
As long as you leave out Batthink, I don't mind.
I think the early 90s was the best, but actually I've had no problems with the versions that come since. Even the Batman Strikes version, even though it's got the ugliest Bruce Wayne, I still like the sensibility behind that. I think the Alfred and that's great. Joker doesn't quite work. He's got the old baseball jersey and everything. He's just not quite right, but
I hate the artistic style of that version, actually.
You don't like it at all? No, it's got some... bits of it work for me. Apart from the Joker, I think the Penguin looks fantastic. And Catwoman looks pretty good, because Catwoman actually was more like the comic book version of Catwoman these days. I still like that. So we've got a last question then.
Are there any projects which you go, no, I would never touch that with a barge pole? Is there anything you just utterly hate to do?
I turned down Penthouse Comics. They offered me a lot of money to do stuff for them, and I just thought, I know what's going to happen with artwork, and I don't even want to think about it.
Did you say Penthouse? Wicked Wonder?
Oh, no. Wicked Wonder would be like Playstore today, what they're offering me. And I said, no, I can't do it.
It's spooky, because I saw that, and I thought, hello, I've seen artwork somewhere before. It's on the end credits of Captain Scarlet.
Yes, you're right. Ron Embleton, yeah. But no, it was just one of those moments where I just thought, I've not been a prude or anything, but I couldn't face doing that. And that'd be like 15 Hail Marys and 3 of that part.
And then when your wife found the reference material.
Yeah. Trying to claim it against tax. That had really got on the tax return. It's almost worth doing it for the tax return.
That was Star Trek one, wasn't it?
Yeah. Anything else? No. Are we done? I think we're done.